little bit about my background for a quick second is I've worked in different capacities with young people for a very long time. Well, what I consider a very long time, but over about 25 years. And I've been working with young people, at risk, vulnerable, teens, in youth ministry. I've done some overseas and local missions into some vulnerable communities, poverty communities, and then was in law enforcement for 12 years, and 6 of those years was undercover. And I actually started in narcotics investigations. And it was in a narcotics investigation, actually, that I came across my first trafficking case. And I know a lot of us in the room tonight have had some amazing questions already, because I was kind of hearing them and overhearing them, and a lot of questions. And I know everybody, has come here to learn, which is fantastic, and we're probably all in a different place. Some of us are hearing about this for the first time. This might be your first seminar or training to learn about trafficking, and then there's others in the room that I recognize and that are very familiar and that do anti-trafficking work in churches in different places. So just as speakers, we always like to recognize that everybody is in a different place, and we also like to recognize that this information is difficult. Especially when it's new and you're hearing it for the first time. It is hard to believe that we are in a culture, we're in a place where we are having these conversations and we're trying to wrap our head around the information that we're learning tonight. And sometimes actually it can take hours, it can take days to kind of process this information and say, did she say this or did he say that? And is this really how it happens? And so I just want to encourage you that to reach out, even if it's a couple of days from now, to continue to be at some of the sessions over Freedom Weekend to learn more and ask questions. And our contact information and my contact information should be available in the materials that you picked up. So as questions come up, please connect. And I also want to let you know, for more information on the topics that we've talked about tonight, you can also go to our Facebook page, and we also have a YouTube channel. So some of the things that are glanced over or not really extended training on tonight that caught your attention, we do have training videos up on the YouTube video. I know Trafficking Justice does as well, and you can get longer sessions about some of the topics that we talked about. And another thing I just want to say is a couple of pieces of information that you picked up out there. One of the main things that we do at ACT United is prevention education. Because while we're still busy learning and talking about this, it's our young people that are the ones online, and it's our young people that are being targeted. So they're the people that need to have the information and the education and the awareness. They need to know the red flags. They need to know what you know now and what you've learned today. And our prevention education program is in the schools, and it's in the churches and different youth groups. And we have different trained and vetted speakers that'll come in and talk to youth. And that would be this piece of information right here. It's called our Youth Aware program. And we also have classes for grade school as well, which is an online safety program. And we actually have youth volunteers that teach the younger kids in those classes. So they get to hear from peers or teenagers that are just slightly older. But prevention education is really the key to get ahead of this and to end this exploitation that is happening to young people. So our topic that I want to talk a little bit about then is, now that we have this information, how do we translate this information into conversation? Now, 25 years of working with young people, I've had a lot of conversations. I don't know your kids, I don't know your grandkids, and you know them best. You know them better than anybody for the most part. It depends upon how many conversations you're having, but for the most part, you know them better than I do. So this isn't about use this formula to talk to your kids, but I hope to provide a framework of what needs to be in these conversations, topics of discussion, to kind of let you into the mind of the youth just a little bit and the things that they say. In 25 years, I've heard why they're talking to you, and I've heard why they won't. And in 25 years of talking to kids, I've heard what their questions are. What are the things that they need to know? What do they say, I wish I would have known so that I could have handled this better? So I just hope to bring some points of information to guide your conversations, and you'll take what Carter shared, you'll take what I share, and just chop it up for your family and for your kids to fit your conversations with your kids. So why do we have to have these conversations? Exploitation is the fastest growing crime in the world. Sexual exploitation is happening in every county of Minnesota. And I think we're starting to wrap our head around that today, having a detective from suburban Eden Prairie in a case from suburban Minnetonka and from Excelsior. So these aren't questions or conversations for particular people or particular geographies. What is happening is the exploitation of young people as young as grade school. Sex trafficking victims range in age from infants to adults, but we focus on infancy through young adults with our organization and our training. Sexual exploitation online and those different forms are happening. One of the youngest conversations that we've had is second grade, being exposed to pornography. So it's targeting our young people. It's the fastest growing crime. It's happening in every county of Minnesota. There's no geography exempt anymore, and the internet has done a good job of taking care of that for all of us. So exploitation is happening. The effects of these crimes are incredible. The effects that sometimes we see in the family, or that teachers or law enforcement or people working with youth may not know a crime of exploitation has occurred, but they might see some of these behaviors. And the effects of these crimes are social. If there's been an exploitation online, a lot of times we'll see bullying in the school, isolation, social isolation. There's mental health issues that come up. We're seeing PTSD, depression, anxiety, fearful behaviors. There's physical effects to these crimes. A lot of violence and abuse are a part of sex trafficking. This is not a sexual experience. This is a violent, abusive experience. Like was mentioned a little bit earlier, people that are buying sex in Minnesota, over half are married. 2/3 have children the same age of the child that they're buying. They are professionals, they're college educated, they're not alcoholics addicted to drugs, and they have no other criminal record. What they're buying isn't sex, they're married, they have relationships. What they're buying is control. What they're buying is the ability to do what I want, when I want, how I want, outside of the norm of a relationship, where if I tried it in a norm relationship, it'd be absolutely not. That relationship would be over, the answer would be no, and there might even be criminal charges if I attempted to do those things. So it's not about buying sex, it's about buying control, and so there is a lot of physical violence and threats, so we see physical effects. So if this is the fastest growing crime targeting young people, and there's so many grave effects to this crime, you would think you'd come forward, you'd tell, you'd want to get help, you'd start the conversation, you'd tell your parents. And unfortunately, the case is there is a high level of secrecy. They are not telling. They are not coming to you to say this has happened. It's important to understand secrecy in our conversations with our kids, because there's a big difference between I'm trying to be rebelliously secretive and I don't want to talk to you and I don't want to tell you anything, and I'm afraid to talk. I'm afraid to tell you. It changes the nature of the conversation. It changes our words from, you will tell me, we don't keep secrets in this house, or, that's a little dramatic, but you get the point of the approach of the conversation, versus, I've learned a couple of things, I've been to some classes, I understand that this is not easy to talk about. You may be afraid to talk about this with me. Understanding that the secrecy is about shame for some, Because although it's wrongly placed, because any child or any teenager that has now been under the control and under the fraud of somebody, usually older but not always, that is skilled in emotional manipulation, skilled in fraud, skilled in manipulating human behavior and finding those cracks and knows how to work those cracks, that leads into abuse and exploitation. It is not the child or the teen's fault, you shoulda, coulda, woulda. We're talking about masters of manipulation that have entered into this child's life or this teen's life. This is outside of the realm of experience at this point. Where we might recognize it, they might not, and usually don't recognize it as a form of manipulation. And so although it's misplaced, there's a lot of shame that I fell for it, that I'm the one that did this, that I've done some behaviors, I've made photos, I've done things that I'm ashamed of. And fear is another reason for secrecy. Fear of telling, because sometimes the perpetrator is a family member, a friend, somebody that knows them or their family very well. Fear, because there is a lot of violence and a lot of threats involved in these crimes. And I can't remember how much Carter, got into that portion of it, but it's the fraud, manipulation, and the relationship that brings them in. And then it is the force, the violence, and the threats that start to keep them in. It's very difficult to just come running to mom or dad or grandma or grandpa or caregiver and say, here's what's happening to me, when you've been hearing every day for the last 3 months or 6 months or sometimes 2 years, you say one word and I know where you live. I've been picking you up from there every other Friday for 2 years, and I know your younger brother. I know your 8-year-old younger brother. The first case that I had was a 14-year-old girl. She had been trafficked since she was 12 years old by her older stepbrother, 25 years old, mom's boyfriend's son that came into the family. She didn't tell because she had a 6-year-old brother, and he reminded her of that every day, that if you don't do what I say, or if you tell that 6-year-old boy, you realize there's a market for that, right? That's why they're not telling. Changes the conversation just a little bit in our mindset about secrecy and why it's kept secret. So what is going to make the difference? These crimes are so devastating that prevention education is really the key. And our program wants to be a reinforcement to the conversations that you're having at home. And we want to be working together to be having these conversations in advance. Because prevention education and having these conversations, as difficult as they might be, we see a lot of success happening with them. For one, kids are making better decisions. They're seeing the red flags. A question we got during break was, well, wait a second, because he's talking about relationships, what happened to kidnapping? And that's not exactly how the question was posed, but that's the question, and that's a very, very common question. And what we're talking about here is relationship grooming. We've done a really good job with stranger danger. We've done a really good job with if a stranger tries to talk to you, run. If a stranger tries to grab you, scream, fight, run. And if somebody tries to snatch you off the street, we've done really good at carry your keys in your hand and your mace and your heels and all kinds of stuff in the parking lot because of the snatch and, because of other crimes. You're not doing a groin kick to your boyfriend that has been buying you dinner and buying you clothes and secretly telling you how beautiful you are for 2 months. You're not punching somebody in the eye and doing no stop run to somebody that you met online that is building relationship with you, is the first person to say I love you and you're beautiful and notice you and start filling those cracks. That's not the kind of person that you kick and run away from. So understanding exploitation and the types of conversations that we have to avoid these crimes. And they're making better decisions, they're knowing the red flags, they're understanding it's a part of relationships, they're advocating for themselves and for their peers. So your conversations are very important to have. So I'm not going to spend too much time on number 2, but has anybody here heard of sextortion? Couple of people, 3 people. Who here has heard of sexting? Yeah, so sexting's the way to go. So the 2 fastest growing exploitation crimes against youth, sextortion and sex trafficking. And so I'm going to say a couple of things about sextortion so you can understand what's happening out there. Sextortion, sexting, sextortion, and child pornography, all the exact same thing. All the same thing. Sexting is culture. It is a sexualized culture out there. This is normal for kids to be hearing and talking about. They're talking about it in the schools. We had 2 kids expelled last week because they got sexual photos to flirt with each other at school, set up a private Facebook page, posted all the photos they managed to get from their peers in school, all these nudies, and set up a private Facebook page. And somebody was absolutely devastated, found out about it because she thought, I'm just sending photos to this guy who likes me, and that's what we do when we're flirting these days. We have a sexualized culture, and then we handed them all a phone, and then the phone happens to have video and cameras on it, and in a sexualized culture, it became the norm and the new way of flirting. And kids are getting devastated by this, and they're doing it like it's no big deal. Sextortion is when I get that first photo from you, and now that I have this nude photo of you, or this sexually explicit photo of you, I now own and control and have collateral for my next question, which is going to be, send me something else, be just a little more naked, or maybe do this in this kind of a way for me because I want that kind of photo. Absolutely not. Really? Because if you don't send me what I'm asking for, then I'm going to blast this on your social media, and your mom's going to see it, your grandma's going to see it, and your grandpa's going to see it. I'm going to print this photo out. I already have something of you. And so the crime of sextortion is that coercion and those threats to get those sexual photos and images online. And it's in our conversations every day, every school, everywhere, Christian school, public school, grade school. It's everywhere. I was speaking to 12-year-olds a couple of weeks ago. Well, it's been about a month now. So I was in a 6th grade class filled with 12-year-olds, and one of the fathers was in the room. And when my slide came up that said the word sextortion on it, he got that, he got that look that I was like, oh, Dad doesn't, I'm going to be talking about something that's got the word sex in here, and I was getting the look in the eye from the back of the room, like, what are you going to be talking about? And I said, well, let me back up in my mind. I'm like, okay, Dad's turning green. Sex in school, 12 years old. And I said, okay, so let me back up a second. So I back up a second to all these 12-year-olds, and I say, who in here knows what sexting is? Every 12-year-old raised their hand. And I said, well, now Dad's in the back of the room watching this, so if I say, who can tell me what it is, then he'll be like, well, just that one kid who clearly has problems, right? So I decided to pick it. I said, you, what is sextortion? And I pointed to a 12-year-old, little guy in the room. And he said, well, that's when you make naked photos of yourself or your friends or somebody else, and then you send them to other people so everybody can see it. And then he says, and did you know there's something called the dark web too? And you can get naked photos on there too, and you can actually see photos and videos of naked people swimming around and doing things they shouldn't do. 12. Dad went from Incredible Hulk to she better keep talking. Keep going. Cancel school, math is over, we're just going to keep going on this. Like unbelievable, 12 years old. So here's the double-edged sword to talk to your kids about, and I let kids know this in the schools. Here's the double-edged sword of this sexting business. This sword can either come down on you or can come down for you, because anybody that participates in sexual explicit photo or video sharing of somebody under the age of 18, that is a felony. That is felony child pornography. Sexting of minors and with minors is felony child pornography. There's 2 14-year-olds in Rice County that are now registered sex offenders for 10 years, and are being convicted of felony child pornography because of taking nude photos of themselves and sharing them around school and showing them to other people, and showed it to a young guy, a student at school that had zero desire to be exposed to that. And he told, and that's how that's how it got found out. So another thing to let our kids know is the other side of that sword is, if this is happening to you, I've learned about something called sextortion and sexting, and that sometimes people are forcing and threatening you to do that. And if you've already sent something, that's okay. Let me help you to get out of this. They need to know. Kids always ask, what is the law? It's the number one question when we're in small group in the school. What is the law? What is the law? They want to know, do I get in trouble? Who gets in trouble? Can somebody help me? What is this process going to look like? It's easy to tell your kids, tell somebody. You know what they're thinking? What happens when I tell? They want to know what happens when I tell. So when I say let's talk about who are trusted people in your life you could talk to if this happens. I want to know about what happens when I tell. Who's in trouble for this? Is there help available? Is anybody arrested? Is this going to stop? Can you get my photos back? So that is one of the number one questions that they have, is there is a law designed to protect them. If you've sent a photo, you shouldn't have sent the photo, but the point now is, how do we get them help? How do we stop it from being spread around? And that's difficult as a parent, because it's devastating to think what is going around with your child. It's devastating to think back on all the talks you had and everything that you said and how much you loved them and protected them, and they did this. It's time, but what they want to know is there help available for me? Who's participating? One of the biggest points we need to realize is the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, when they first started getting reports of the cyber sextortion that was happening to young people, found that 50% of victims of this crime were boys. We tend to think that sex crimes and sexual exploitation is only happening to our girls. And 50% of victims of this crime are boys. And who's doing it to them? Peers and friends, boyfriends, girlfriends, people they know right in the school or the community, and strangers that are online. Now online it's happening, sometimes I just am who I am, and I might be a 50-year-old guy and I'm approaching you online as that 50-year-old guy, and I'm saying, hey, I just kind of noticed that you have been posting some stuff about depression. I struggled with depression when I was your age. I have some good things I can help you with, and they build that relationship, but a lot of times it's a fake profile. And they get online as anybody they want to be, make friends with that young person, build that relationship. 2 months later, I'm sending them a photo of myself, but it's not me, it's something I Googled, and I found some other, hotter person, and sent it. And then I said, well, are you going to send me anything back? I mean, if you liked me, you would. I'm kind of putting myself out here, and you're not sending me anything back. And then the young person sends that photo back or that video back, and then now here we go. Here's the collateral and here's the control, and the control is exerted over the young person. 1 in 3 young people that are affected by this crime report inflicting self-harm, committing some act of self-harm, including attempted suicide, and we've also had completed as a result of this crime. The level of control and fear involved in this vulnerability and this exposure is really high. So this guy right here, just a real case example, is does anybody know this? So this is a man from Eagan, Minnesota, who sat at his home computer and set up 2 fake profiles, one as a 20-year-old, really hot, good-looking, young lady, and also set up a profile as a female modeling agency executive or agent that was looking for male models. He would show up to Minnesota State high school football games and lacrosse games and swim meets. He would look at the back of the jersey, say, Anderson, Anderson is the one that I'm interested in. And then he'd look at the sports scores, get the first name, go home, be a 20-year-old hot chick, and then find John Anderson from the Lakeville football team online and make friends with him. Within a couple of weeks, within a couple of months, built that relationship. He had 300 people that knew him as that female online. 171 were high school boys. I always highlight this case because we need to be talking to our boys as much as our girls and our young ladies. And he managed to get 3,000 sexual images of our high school boys. And he had distributed those images 1,000 times into the dark web and child pornography sites. He managed to lure 2 of those teens in person, and one, during the course of the investigation, was discovered that he had taken his life during this experience of exploitation. So again, just happening to our boys too, and making sure we're having conversations with them. So sex trafficking I'm not going to go over because Carter did, other than to say, please incorporate boys. Please talk to your boys and your young men about exploitation as well. You know, there's certain conversations we tend to have with girls, there's certain conversations we tend to have with boys and young men. But boys are just as vulnerable to sexual exploitation. And usually what happens and how we frame our conversations is we want girls to not be victimized, and we want boys to not be perpetrators and offenders. And our conversations and our cultural message and how we tend to look at this, at the gender difference and how we frame our conversations, is we're trying to help girls protect themselves, and we're trying to have boys not become perpetrators and offenders. But we have to remember that as great as the conversation is to our young men about how to treat women and girls, and how to be chivalrous, and how to be respectful, and how to be really good men and good fathers and a good friend, we have to remember that some of us that are trying to address kind of the male, not wanting males to be, I'm trying to be like as careful as possible because I'm really fiery about this topic. So say it nice, Jessica, help me, Lord. Be kind. We have to realize that if we're trying to address what culture has decided is masculinity, and that masculinity is somehow bad, you know, we have to remember that the 30-year-old, the 50-year-old, the 60-year-old, the 70-year-old that you feel has some sort of place in culture was also once 6, was also once 4, was also once 15, and he also was developing, and he also was maturing, and he also needed to know that he had value and he had worth. Since 2000, we've known that 50% of victims in child pornography are boys, and that pornography depicts way more violence. There's more ticks and counts of violence perpetrated when it is a boy in child pornography. 36% of trafficked minors in the United States are boys. 36%, that's just the ones we know. In 2008, New York did a study and found that 45% of trafficked minors in the state of New York were boys. So I'm really strongly encouraging us to have those conversations with our boys too. They need to know that they are valued, they're loved, they're worth it, they can protect their bodies. They are more than what culture and society is trying to tell them that they are. And having those same conversations and encouraging them to tell that masculinity and vulnerability can coexist. It doesn't make you less masculine, it makes you 6. Okay, it makes you 14, right? So please incorporate young men and our boys and have those same encouraging, equipping conversations with them too. One point I want to make in our conversations when we're talking about how to stay safe in relationships and against sex trafficking is these 4 pictures right here. When we talk about, well, who's buying and who's selling and who's vulnerable and at risk, we look at these 4 pictures. and to bring to the table, to your conversations, all 4 of these people are arrested and convicted traffickers in the state of Minnesota. All 4 of them were trafficking people in Minnesota. This guy did the boyfriend relationship. This guy did the you need a better life. What he asked a 15-year-old girl on the street was, you look like you can use a family. Do you want to be a part of the family? Crack, right? Remember what Carter talked about? They're good. They're good. And he saw the crack. Do you want to be a part of the family? That doesn't sound like, do you want to hop in the car so I can drive you to Minnesota so a month from now I can sell you out of a hotel to complete strangers, and when you don't comply, some very severe things ended up happening to her. This lady up here, rural Carver County, Minnesota, farmland, was selling her 8-year-old granddaughter to a registered sex offender in Iowa and got interdicted by police. She lived in a beautiful development right next to a farm in rural Carver County, Minnesota. This guy played the don't I look like blue collar innocent, I look safe. And she decided that she would target a vulnerable student in her high school who had some developmental disabilities, didn't have a lot of friends, ate lunch alone all the time. Crack became her friend, best friend, ate lunch together. So in our conversations, they can be males, they can be females, they can be friends, they can be adults. So I'm going to jump over tools because Carter did a really good job with this first part right here of the tools. And knowing passwords and usernames, we'll talk about that in a second, very important. But be aware of this, that those filters and those tools and that software that we put on the internet, that blocks content coming in. That doesn't block the person pretending to be the 3rd grader or the high school senior at a different high school to play Fortnite with the person in your home. So it is not blocking relationships, it's not blocking predators. If I'm a predator and I'm targeting young people, I'm not on a X-rated site that's going to be blocked. I'm going to be in a game. Wherever young people are, a lot of times we ask, well, what are the popular apps we need to look out for? And Carter put a few up there. But what are the popular apps we need to look for? The ones youth are on. So if it's popular with youth, it's popular with predators. If it's #1 with kids, Fortnite, Roblox, Kick, Live.me, if it's popular with kids or young people, it's popular with predators because they're going to who they are targeting. So that changes. But be aware that you're not blocking somebody pretending to be the 3rd grader or the high schooler and having those conversations, the fake profiles. And also please be aware of anime child pornography. This is just incredible. There is animated child pornography out there depicting extreme violence, but in animation, and it pops up on kids' games usually as an ad, and then it looks like a cartoon, so they can click to watch the show. But the show is animated child pornography, and it's actually incredibly violent, and it is illegal. So, fortunately, federally, we've caught up with this. And have a law against it. But just because it's animated doesn't mean it's for kids. And here's some resources, but they're also on the sheet that was on the sheet out there for you to stay on top of information. So it's already printed out there. So just talking about talks. Stay aware and informed. So you've learned a lot tonight. Websites, different places where you can learn more, staying aware. Law enforcement and parents are the last to know everything because technology constantly changes. A new app pops up, something popular with kids now that wasn't popular last week. They loved Facebook, and then all of us moms and grandparents and older people got on it and they were like, this is bogus, let's go somewhere else. And then they picked something else. So we always have to stay on top of, what is the latest, what is happening and what is out there. Some of the biggest pieces of information came out tonight, which is exploitation happens in the context of relationship. Protection, not privacy. So, well, I'll tell you how we gave our second daughter her cell phone, because how we use our words and how we choose to, present devices to our young people is important. I never once thought, but I also had, I had also worked with kids for a long time, and 6 years undercover, you learn and see things you never wish you did. So I also had a little bit of background, but I never once thought that a device that I would hand over to somebody was an issue of privacy. So one of the things that kids are always, hollering about is my privacy. Like, she's trying to be in all my stuff. She's trying to be in my grill. She's trying to be in my stuff. She's trying to read this. She wants my emails. My mom, my dad, my grandma's always trying to look at my stuff, and I need some privacy. So I just want to encourage you that yes, they deserve privacy. Yes, they deserve privacy in like a journal, and even if that journal is on the computer, right? That if you're in Word or you're in Notepad or you're in something where you're just writing and it's not an app or it's not a chat or a text with somebody on the internet, I won't go in it. I respect privacy. Respecting privacy as they're growing and maturing and developing, and they got stuff that's embarrassing. They've told me it's embarrassing. It is very embarrassing. They're not kidding. We don't have to see that or know everything. They do deserve some privacy. But a device that has internet access is an issue of protection, not privacy. And when we handed over the phone, we were excited to give her a phone. We told her we were excited to give her the phone. But we also let her know that together we're going to make a family plan about the guidelines to keep you safe so that you can have your phone and talk to your friends and text and download apps so that you can do all that, but safely. So it depends upon how we want to have that conversation, but I encourage you to look at it as an issue of protection, and that a device that gives any human being anywhere in this world access to a kid, that is not something to be an issue of privacy. And maybe talk to them about, well, what do you need to have private? How can we make that happen so that I can still check in your phone? So know the passwords that he brought up earlier. That's just par for the course in protection in handing over that device. And it's never, or for me anyways, it's not about you. It's about what I've learned. I trust you. I know you'll make good decisions, but the internet is big and expansive, and anybody in the world can send anything they want to you. So I want to make sure that you can use your phone and be on your apps safely. I'm going to bring Dawn up here to say one thing. So Dawn is with Act United, and she's got 3 boys at home, and she has powerful conversations with her boys. She has powerful conversations with her boys, and so I just want to bring her up to talk about these 3 things right here before I end on the last piece.
Hi. So my boys and I talk often about healthy relationships. If I see or hear something in the news, or I see a story going around on Facebook, age appropriately, I will talk to them about it. They can't be aware if they don't know what's going on. And the more I talk to them about what's okay, what's not okay, and sometimes our conversations get really uncomfortable for all of us, especially the little ones. They're 10 and 8. But they know, and they know what healthy relationships are. They also know that they can talk to me about that. So if they ever need to tell me anything, and there's times they've told me things about friends and other things, they know I believe them, and they know that I'm on the same page as them about what's healthy and what's acceptable. And I just think that that's super important. You want to talk to them just as much about that stuff as you do about, you're awesome, you had a really great game tonight, or you're super smart, or good job. Like, it has to be something that they know they can talk to you about, because it happens so frequently and they don't have to be scared to talk to you about that. And if somebody tells you something, believe them and ask questions.
Yeah, believing is super important. I've heard so many horror stories from young people that said, well, I did tell somebody, and they said, you're lying or you're exaggerating or that can't be true. When it comes to believing when they're talking to you, my philosophy is this, and it was the same in police work. I'm going to believe every word of it until it's proved wrong, instead of trying to make you look wrong and then find out it's true. That's a way bigger mistake to make. So believe at first. And with these crimes, with the shame and the fear, a lot of times youth will test the water. They'll pop out just a little bit just to see the reaction. And if the reaction is good, if they're believed, if it's positive, if it's more, how can I help you? How can I listen? What do you need? Instead of, no way, or are you kidding, or how did that happen? You know, they pop out a little bit to test the water. So start with belief and a positive response, and then go from there and let the rest shake itself out from there. So two of the most important things to talk about in these conversations is relationships. Because I think we've learned tonight that it's least likely to be snatched off the street when it comes to exploitation than it is to have somebody grooming and building a relationship with you, which is absolutely preparation for abuse and exploitation. So talk about healthy, my mom always does that. She makes her sentences so long she runs out of breath. And now I can no longer make fun of her. I've crossed the threshold. So here we go. So healthy relationships. Youth-aware surveys, especially in the suburbs, we're finding kids, one of the biggest learning points that they take away is, I had no idea that trafficking happened in a relationship. I thought I would just get kidnapped off the street. So they didn't have their radar and those red flags going for those online conversations or those in-person relationships. So huge learning point to have. Healthy relationships are this. We need to, it seems kind of odd or weird, especially if we have really healthy relationships in our household. It's almost like, well, you live healthy relationship, you should know this, but they really don't. They really need this conversation, because if they don't know what healthy looks like, then when control peeks its head in, it might be normal. It doesn't stand out. Or when I don't want to, meet your parents, that doesn't stand out. But when we talk to them about healthy relationships, the respect, don't pressure you into doing something you don't want to do, honesty, trust, supporting your dreams and your goals. Then we can talk about the red flags. They'll see these stand out. Not having respect for your personal boundaries. Kids are talking about this all the time, about how they get so much pressure to do things that they don't want to do. Secrecy, controlling, and isolation. Good relationships want to hang out with your friends. They want to meet your parents. They're not isolating you. And any form of threat and abuse is not okay in a relationship. This is my final point right here. And I'm telling you, this is so important to me. And now Carter put it in such a beautiful picture too, with all the cracks and fill in the cracks. Somebody's going to fill them. Somebody's going to fill them. The question is who? Are we going to fill them? Are we going to fill them so that those cracks don't exist? So that there's nothing for a stranger, a perpetrator, a predator, an abuser, or anybody to come and fill? Are we going to fill those cracks? And when I'm talking to high school students, and it don't matter if I'm in North Minneapolis or I'm out in the suburbs, and kids start getting antsy and uncomfortable, especially in certain schools, and they're starting to, get a little fidgety about all of this, and all of a sudden I start talking about their value and their worth. Silence. Silence. Why? They're absorbing in the cracks. And I talk to kids that have already been affected by this, that know somebody affected or haven't been affected yet, thank God. And every time the room goes silent, they are ready. They're sponges. They're absorbing this, that they have value. The biggest protection tool you can give is their value. sometimes I hear this a lot actually. They'll say, I did the parental controls, I disabled the GPS, I put on the software, I had the talk, I did all this stuff, and they're still trying to find a way to get around the rules. They're still getting around all the guidelines and all the rules. And I go, let's switch our conversation from talking to the brain about being aware and having rules, and let's start talking to the heart about their value, that you're worth it. You're worth being protected. You have value. You have an awesome future. It don't matter that you don't know what it is yet. You're still on a journey to understanding how valuable you are. But I am going to fill that crack. I'm going to speak to the heart and let them know how valuable they are, and that they have a future to protect, and that their decisions today are going to have an effect on whatever next year is. They're still figuring it out. That's okay. But it's our job to reinforce their value, their worth, and their future. Those are the kind of kids that don't want to get around the rules, because those are the kind of kids that are saying no even before we get to them and have the talk. Those are the kind of kids that are saying, no way, I don't do that, forget about it. I'm going to tell if you say that one more time, because they have a recognition of their value. Their cracks are getting filled, and they're getting filled by us. So that's what I want to leave you with. This is one of the slides I give them. Protect yourself, protect your future. You're valued, worthwhile, and you have a future of hope. So united we win. I hope that our program can reinforce what you're saying in the home, and I know that your conversations will reinforce their value and their worth. So I also moonlight as an auctioneer, because I talk. So if you need 40 lessons, I can talk pretty fast. Go through a lot of water, but I can talk pretty fast. So I'll stick around for any questions, but just respectful of time or whatever. However, Amanda would like to, or Becca would like to close. So
thank you so much.
Yeah.